Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth, the study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which is science or study of fake, lie, or imagination, whichever way you pronounce it, mythology or mythology, whether way. It's made of Sanskrit root word myth. So Sanskrit root word myth means fake, lie, or imagination. Today I have a very special guest, and we are talking about Atmanirbhar Indian Air Force, because that's where we're going to. And I can tell you to the audience, my favorite aircraft is Tejas. I don't know why, but I love that aircraft. The way it is designed, and the only problem is the engines, American engines. But everything else is good. So I have a very special guest. So let's welcome Uday Kolhatkar, Wing Commander Uday Kolhatkar. Welcome, sir.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for my introduction. I'm an ex-Indian Air Force, ex-airline pilot who has about 43 years of experience of flying. And I've flown about 6 different fighter aircraft in the Air Force and about 5 different civil transport aircraft. All of them have been lovely. All of them have their character of their own. And I've really enjoyed flying all of those aircraft. And it's a very interesting thing to be able to talk to people who are just coming into their careers and will probably be the future aviators. Whether they're going to be test-born, that is, they're going to be flying drones, or whether you're going to be flying in the air, actually. Doesn't matter. There's a lot of excitement in store for those people who are interested. That much I can vouch for. Right from my starting gliding trip, which I did, till the last Airbus 330, I flew into Kathmandu airport, which is a very risky airport to fly into sometimes, especially when the weather is bad because of the clouds in the mountains. So, yeah, I'll just start off from my flying career, basically, where I started from. So my dad also was in the Air Force, and the first impression I got was when I was very young and standing under a huge aircraft. It was called a Liberator. This was way back in 1962, 63, when they had just started flying Liberators in the Indian Air Force. And Liberator was used by the Indian Air Force after the Second World War, because there were a whole lot of them available and the US wanted to palm them off to a lot of people. So we got our share. I was fortunate to be standing under that wing because it totally mesmerized me. I couldn't stop asking my dad, whose hand I was holding, "Dad, what is this? What is this?" In some broken English. This was in Agra Cantonment, Agra Airport. And subsequently, I saw a lot of war movies and other things which did motivate me further. I did ask my dad a lot of questions that helped me a lot to find out more about fighter flying. And it so happened that I was subsequently selected into the Air Force wing of the National Defense Academy in the Air Wing, and I became a fighter pilot. So we initially started our flying on gliders, Sedberg, and that was basically Indian-made aircraft glider. It was nice, and then subsequently I flew the ST2, the Hindustan Trainer 2, which is also a loose copy of a Chipmunk modified to Indian Air Force requirements. And it's it was a monoplane, and basically it's not a biplane that a lot of those aircraft had. And it was fully aerobatic and fully spin capable. And this was the first training aircraft of ours. It was very tough. So the guys who got through this were actually good pilots. They were actually able to adapt to flying very well. Out of it was fairly high, you know, selection rate, in the sense a lot of people did unfortunately not make the grade, and they went off to different streams. They never lost out in terms of seniority or something, but they did lose out in terms of flying fighters and flying transport aircraft. Subsequently, after we did that, we went off to the basic jet training, which was on the Kiran at JT 16, which was actually the aircraft which was equivalent to the strike. It was it was a loose copy of a different aircraft, African aircraft. It's a training aircraft, and it was very good trainer aircraft. It used to do a full 6-turn spin without any problems, fully aerobatic. Could fly in night, day, clouds, all weather. You could do close formation, tactical flying. So it was a good grounding for us before we went off into our next phase. When I got posted to the Marut squadrons, HF-24. These HF-24 aircraft were Hindustan fighter aircraft, and they were manufactured by HAL, however, indigenously made, but the design was by Dr. Kurt Tank, who was a very leading scientist in aircraft technology at that time. He was German. So he came to India and he designed this aircraft for us. The aircraft, of course, was a good design, but unfortunately, the metallurgy was a big issue for us. And metallurgy has been a big issue for India right from the word go. We had problems with the airframe structure. You know, sometimes it would contract fast, sometimes it would contract slow, sometimes the engines would seize, and you know, sometimes the ejection seat wouldn't fire properly. Suppose some problem was there. Sometimes the aircraft would break up in the air also. So it was a tough time we went through during my initial phases, and you can imagine I was a 21-year-old youngster, but I just, you know, at that age you don't see any danger or anything. You don't even think about it too much. You're just so keen to fly that you just go ahead and do what's necessary and just do it properly. So it was a very interesting time flying the HF-24, and I learned a lot from my compatriots, my seniors. So basically, one thing about flying is there's a lot of good information floating around and a lot of, you know, not so good information. So if you tend to get you know, and the not so good information seems more attractive than the really good information. Good information has got a lot of facts and figures, details, and methodology, whereas the not so good information sounds very romantic and kind of, you know, high funda stuff, and you tend to get misled by that. So it's basically very important that you focus on the good information, even though the other one seems more attractive. So that is what we have to think about. And yeah, that's how I survived through my HF-24 tenure. I did fairly okay, got posted to MiG-21 squadrons. And in MiG-21 squadrons, my first MiG-21 I flew was the Type 96, which was a MiG-21M. Now, the big difference between the first MiG-21s, the fish beds, which came into our technology, into our Air Force, which were the Type 77s, was that the Type 96 had boundary layer blowers. Boundary layer blowers allow the aircraft to fly at a higher angle of attack on final, which is lower speeds, thereby reducing the landing speed by as much as 40 to 50 or 60 kilometers per hour. This actually is very useful, plus it improves the visibility. So it reduced the number of landing accidents, and it also reduced the wear and tear on the tires. You could land in low visibility conditions. There was less stress on the youngsters who were flying this aircraft. This aircraft was all-weather aircraft. You could fly it at night, day. Fortunately for me, I did a lot of intense flying in MiG-21. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I flew that aircraft to the limits, but I always remember to respect the aircraft. Like you have to respect for all nature, you have to respect it. So same way, you have to respect your aircraft a lot. Like I was saying earlier, that you have to treat the aircraft better than you would treat your wife. That means you have to understand the aircraft backwards, forwards, in all kinds of moods, situations, and be able to handle, not really handle it, but be able to be part of it, I'll say. You have to be part of it. So similarly with your wife, if you feel that you're a separate person from your wife, you're going to have it someday. So you might as well get used to be very close to the wife. That's why they say wife is part of you. Same way the aircraft is a part of you. You strap your aircraft onto your back and you fly it like a part of you. So I was it was very interesting experience to fly the MiG-21. I flew in all kinds of day, night, dark night. We did air-to-ground weaponry in the daytime, in the nighttime. We have to practice all the time. The Air Force is one non-stop practice for wartime situations. So we have to practice all the time to be able to use the aircraft as a weapon. Though it's a very lovely aircraft to fly, but you have to use it as a weapon. And not only do you fly singly, you fly in formations. So when you fly in formations, you have to be able to maneuver. Suppose you're the leader, you have to maneuver the other aircraft so that you're always in a mutually abreast position, like this, where you're clearing each other's tails all the time. Suppose you have 4 aircraft, everybody has got a role. Nobody has time to waste. You're navigating, you're formatting, you're keeping a situational awareness at all times during the flight, and you're also doing the duty of flying it safely and accurately where you need to fly it. So it was very interesting to fly the MiG-21. It gave me a very good basis for my next posting, which was even more interesting. It was on the Jaguar, which is also a deep penetration strike aircraft. And we were actually, the Jaguar was brought in as a counter to our adversary's nuclear power plant in Kahuta. So our aircraft was brought with the low-level navigation, low radius of being able to strike that nuclear plant and come back safely. So that is why. So basically, the Air Force did expand based on what we developed the threats around us, around India, and that was also very intense flying and extremely strenuous because sometimes you had to fly for 2 hours at a time continuously. There's no toilet on board. There's no sleeping. There's no autopilot. You have to keep flying the aircraft in all kinds of weather. In the Jaguar, I had multiple roles. I flew the Jaguar in the ground attack role, in the electronic warfare role, in the sea role. Flew it to carry out anti-shipping missile attacks if necessary, if demanded. This is all demanded. We were just practicing. There was no live situation as such for me where I actually used it in anger or anything like that. It was just practice. And so that was very good. The Jaguar was extremely nice, and I was posted out to the flying instructors school where I did my flying instructors training on again back to the Kirin STT and the Hindustan Trainer 2. And then I went on to train some cadets for about 1.5 to 2 years. Those guys have done very well. I'm so happy that they're all alive and they're all very happy and smiling and still happy with me, in spite of all the abuses I must have given them during our flying. And subsequently, I was selected off to fly the Indian Air Force aerobatic team, which was on the Hawker Hunter aircraft. for 2 years. I flew there up to 9 aircraft formation aerobatics we used to do. We did some just nice displays. Um, and so the Air Force is very, very, I haven't told you my marital status also, because I got married somewhere when I was a qualified flying instructor, and I had my first addition to the family was a Labrador, a black dog, and then my son, who's also a pilot actually, Um and then my elder son, and then of course we got posted off to the far east of India, Chabua, where it's flying formation aerobatics. We used to only pop out of that place when we did formation aerobatics in different places of the country. Otherwise, we were told to fly over the mountains in the east, which is also very good. And then subsequently, I was told to go for the fighter strike leader course, which is very intense. We call it the Top Gun of India, and Top Gun School of India. A very intense course of about 3 to 4 months. All types of tactics, and there's a lot of scope for adapting new tactics also if necessary, based on the latest technologies. I don't want to go into all that, because though it's happened many years back, about 23, 25 years, no, more than that actually, 30 years back, but still, there's a lot of things which I don't want to unnecessarily divulge about it, but it was very interesting. And after completing that successfully, I was posted to a deputy flight commandership in Jaguar Squadron, where I flew for 1.5 years we have something called the Squadron FSL, a Squadron Fighter Strike Leader. So that was that, as well as the deputy flight commander. And then, of course, I got posted off to the staff college, where I did the staff course, 92, 93. Did very well in that, apparently. So I was having such a great time taking a break from flying, because we get all kinds of opportunities there. We meet people from all over the world, officers from all over, defense forces from all over the world come. We meet the Army and the Navy, and postmates who were there together as an NDA. They also came there. So it was non-stop, in one non-stop interesting experience.
So you have such a wonderful experience, and I'm sure it will be very motivating to the youth who is watching, and whether it's an American youth or Indian youth, that flying is a great career, and as per your experience. So when you met with officers from different countries, so how did you compare Indian Flight Strike School? I came to know for the first time from you, Top Gun of India, as compared to the other countries, because people have watched Top Gun movies and a lot of reviews published on Tom Cruise movies, and many things are like fictional, but he's a fighter pilot. He's a trained fighter pilot, and does his acrobats on his own planes. He uses his own planes. So how do you compare the Indian Air Force pilots with other pilots of the world?
So it's not only what I will say, because what I did my course in 1990. So obviously, what I'm saying will be slightly different, probably, from what is now presently happening. At that time, we didn't have that many high performance aircraft as what the Americans have, and therefore the aircraft capabilities were not as good. So a lot of it depends on the aircraft capabilities, not only the pilot skill, aircraft capability. Now, if you see the latest exercises which they are having, high flag and a couple of other exercises in Alaska, very interesting exercise between the Indian Air Force and other air forces. We fly with NATO. Indian Air Force flies with NATO, and they are always bringing back some trophies or the other. That is, you have these coordinated strikes and attacks, and depending on how much of success rate and all that, you get certain gradings. And the Indian Air Force pilots, fighter pilots, I must say, are doing exceptionally well. They're amongst the top pilots in the world. Even the American Air Force accepts it. They also come and do training. Lot of integrated training has happened since, especially after this quad has started off and other things where we do it with the Australian Air Force, with NATO, with different countries in the world. And there's a lot of interoperability which has been done. A lot of our terminologies have become standardized. And the Indian Air Force pilots have adapted very well to all these changes. So it is very interesting to see this the new generation of fighter pilots who have really are top gun, totally. They're top gun, I must say that. And there are three of them now training to be astronauts. Hopefully, touch wood, they will be soon in space, maybe in the next couple of years. And so there's nothing really to compare. They are amongst the best. There's no doubt about that.
As a trainer, you have seen that, and you mentioned different fighter planes, and it's very fascinating for me personally because I love aviation, and I'm on a private pilot side. So one question comes in that the new assets with Indian Air Force is adding. Now, in the initial part, you mentioned about the drone pilots as well as fighter pilots in the air and on the ground. So what is the main difference between the two?
So I will say that the drone pilot is actually quite important now. In today's world, today's warfare scenario, the drone pilot is very important. So the fighter pilot, see, the thing is, when you take their aircraft, it's a huge loss to your country if you lose that aircraft to a surface-to-air missile or other things. Whereas the same attack can be carried out by a drone, especially like in close air support or against close interdiction of enemy logistics supplies and all, battlefield is called BAI, battlefield air interdiction. These are very dense environments where there are a lot of surface-to-air missiles, which can cause a lot of damage to fighter aircraft. So in these kinds of intense scenarios or very heavily defended targets, it's better to use drones. You lose less fighter aircraft, and the thing is, with the fighter aircraft being so demanding, there are a lot of the pilots who fall, unfit for various reasons. Sometimes they have spinal problems, or they have neck problems, or they have, just because of high G forces, they have certain damage. The body sustains a lot of damage because it's not designed to take that kind of beating, so to speak. So they go into these fields, which is called drone pilots. And they do as good a job there as they would even if they were a fighter pilot. And they will be as effective for the Air Force. And the drone pilot, basically what he does is he takes over that aircraft through satellite linkage and he flies it to the destination. He can see everything exactly as what a fighter pilot would do, but he can see it. He has more time. The drones are slower. He can actually spot the target. He doesn't get picked up, so his drone doesn't get picked up so easily because it's a very small, insignificant target. Radar sometimes can't even pick it up. And even if they pick it up, the drone has its own self-defense capabilities of throwing out chaff or flares in case something is launched against it. The only thing which sometimes is a problem is the small arms fire, because people fly the drone at lower levels, and that's the time when the small arms fire can be fired at the drone, especially if it's too slow. So yes, but you lose a drone, you get another one. I mean, you get this thing working, and you can carry the weapons.
In the Ukraine-Russian war, we have seen a use of drones extensively, and it has changed the landscape of the warfare over there. And also the Su-35s have been very formidable. The new Su-35s have been very formidable. SM, they call it SM. So my question to you is like with the Atmanirbhar push and coming, you can see the Tejas aircraft coming on board, and I've been a big fan. It's a beautiful looking airplane, and also highly capable. Also now, Indian Air Force has a very the strictest buying rules. I mean, I can say procedures and
Okay.
the qualitative, and I think the experience speaks for itself. So, and also Tejas aircraft has a very low radar cross section also. So,
Yeah.
so now with the new Tejas coming in, and also the old Russian planes might be retired. I don't know, but might be retired. But all the pilots I've heard, they love MiG-21s. I don't know why. People have very love for that machine, even though it's called a flying coffin for various reasons. And bird hits is the most common one. And so how do you compare Tejas with other addition assets which India has? And India has rejected American planes for some reason. F-18s have been rejected, F-35s have been rejected. India went in for Rafale, which is a like a Mirage 2000 plus plus plus. And so how do you compare these Tejas to the new breed of planes which India has?
So the Tejas was, you know about the history of it. It was supposed to come out in 1985 onwards. Supposed to be in operational service by 1995. However, it has got delayed. It's a good aircraft, but it's single engine and a single seater. And normally nowadays you do fly aircraft which are twin seater and preferably twin engine because the twin engine has more flexibility. You know, if you have an engine fail or engine problem, you can always bring back that aircraft to land. So the engine is of course very reliable, but if the engine is not totally indigenous, a lot of that it's basically assembled in our factory, and that's a big issue. Technology wise, we are okay, but to get the actual metallurgy of that aircraft is a problem. Metallurgy of the engine as well as the airframe design, and that is the problem. So we are going to have to work hard on those aspects, and that has to be done by private sector, military combined. So therefore, I think we are heading towards a military industrial complex where, because it requires a lot of investment. No country, whether it's the USA or USSR, nobody parts with their metallurgy secrets. And to get that metallurgy right, you have to spend a lot of money. And it's, you know, you get it, you manufacture some aircraft, you see how it performs. You, even on the MiG-29, you know, it's supposed to do 9G and all that, but the aircraft has been known to just disintegrate in the air, especially at sustained G maneuvers. And so it has happened with other aircraft, F-16 and other aircraft. So though they say that this is capable of doing 9G sustained and things like that, it it's not so easy. The design the design is so delicate that even a small error or even a small design flaw in the material that could cause the aircraft to disintegrate. So that's why it's very important to keep in mind that these aircraft, the technology wise, they are good. They have very advanced, what they call the Doppler radars and the multi-array radars and multi-spectrum, and their self-defense measures, which are there for the against different kind of missile attacks and other things. They have different kind of spectrum to cover those so that they can do a self. The aircraft does it automatically. You don't have to wait for it. So in the Su-30, what happens is there's two pilots really. One is a systems operator and one is the actual pilot. And the system operator is actually only operating systems. Same way with the Su-25 also, because there's just so much of workload, the pilot can barely, you must have seen in the Top Gun also where the F-14 had the systems operator. Unfortunately, he had, in that movie, they showed that he had the accident, they had the accident and went into a high angles attack stall and then in a flat spin. So these are the things which are uh, a problem with the that generation of aircraft. And but some of the new aircraft have now got flexible, the aerofoil design. So because of composite wing structures, these aerofoils itself, they become, suppose the aircraft does go into a kind of a spin like a situation, the aerofoil itself can be changed into a low speed aerofoil. Normally it's at high speed, now it can be changed to a low speed. So that way you can recover even without even if you lost an engine, you might be able to still recover the aircraft. And there are different other methods to. Uh, so basically, what I'm saying is that the aircraft design is a constantly evolving process. Even though we got the Rafale some time back, it's still about 15 years, 10, 15 years old technology. And even the Su-35, if you get it, it's a Soviet design. Now, the Soviet design has got its own advantages, its own disadvantages. Firstly, Soviet aircraft are generally a little bulkier than the Western aircraft. And they've used more composites in the Western aircraft. And Soviet aircraft have used more metal in their structure to make it bigger. Bigger in the sense, not bigger, but heavier and also stronger. So that is very important. So yeah, anything else?
So coming back to the Indian Air Force design, the Tejas, you said composite and everything else. So
Yeah,
how do you, if you were to get a chance today
yeah,
to with the new changing warfare, India has a lot of transport fleet also now, good transport fleet, C-295s are coming and other planes are also there.
yeah,
And it's a man behind the machine which counts, which I can clearly see from your
yeah,
discussion, the man behind the machine that counts. And with the changing scenarios, and also the Indian Air Force had a long 3,000-kilometer run in the oceans from south to the east to the west, and that is a
correct.
pretty large area to cover. Even the American forces, there's a something on the Hollywood and something in the real, two different things.
Correct.
Hollywood is a propaganda, and so people think of them. That's how they built up their image over the years. But we see in Syria that American forces are not flying in the Russian no-fly zones, not flying. S-400, S-500, S-300, they are actually stopping Americans to fly in any of those zones. They did not put down their F-22s also because they might lose them. And
Correct.
also, whenever there is a threat of cyclone, sometimes I see that the American forces, they move in the ocean or in some other bases immediately. So very
Yeah,
careful in protecting their assets first. So
yeah,
and I can understand also because these assets are so expensive and so difficult to procure for them also. So
yeah,
American designs are focused on literally like a pinpoint exact operation. I mean, not today's American Air Force not designed for long wars because for that you need a bulky, like you're saying, Soviet kind of planes which can withstand bullets, many bullets, and still they can fly. It's like a flying tank. So how do you compare the Atmanirbhar Indian Air Force to the old philosophies which are in the American space or Russian space?
So one thing I must say that the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Military have a doctrine. It's called the Land Air War Doctrine. Now that is something which they used in the Gulf, first Gulf War, which was basically they will use air power only to bomb the hell out of everybody, bomb the hell out of the enemy, destroy their total infrastructure, destroy all the command C3I networks, command, control, communication, intelligence networks, cut out their logistics totally, totally paralyze the enemy, and thereafter use the and in fact totally disable their ground defenses by bombing them using those bombs, the huge bombs which were just one step lower than a nuclear bomb. Uh, they were called something busters or something like that, huge one. And they would just knock out the vacuum of an entire area of, say, about a kilometer, square kilometer. And that means the vacuum will just suck out the air from the soldiers' lungs, and they'll just die. So they use those kind of bombs on troops, Iraqi troops. So they had no chance. I mean, the Iraqi army had no chance. They were so badly beaten up, they just surrendered immediately. And therefore, there was no land warfare required really by the American forces. They just had to go there and the people were surrendering. Very, very rarely did they encounter some kind of a resistance. And also they had all these, they had the total advantage of the electromagnetic spectrum, all the intelligence capabilities, all the reconnaissance capabilities, the satellites and everything. So that is the kind of warfare that the US Air Force, the US military would be operating in. Whereas the Indian Air Force would not be in that kind of situation at all. We don't have that kind of capability, huge numbers of aircraft flying and destroying, and we're not going to have a static target waiting for us to be clobbered. So we will have to operate in a totally different scenario, much like what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, where even with all its capability of the Russian aircraft they're having so many drones and fighter aircraft available, they still can't, they don't risk their aircraft in the intensely, airspace of defended airspace of the Ukrainian defended airspace, and therefore they have to use drones, and that is where India also has to head. We also have to go into drones more than anything else. The other thing we have to keep in mind is surface-to-air missiles and surface-to-surface missiles. Now, surface-to-surface missiles, which are there now, they are of different types. We have tactical missiles of different ranges. We have strategic missiles. So you have a nice mixture of them. So in India, basically, we don't want to get into any war. We don't attack some other country just like that. There has to be a huge, big reason, or that country has attacked you first. So we are going to be more on the defensive side, where we are not going to just go and attack somebody like what the US Air Force does. The US has got much more resources. They have got all the countries supporting them through United Nations and other things. So they can go ahead and do things like that. But the Indians are not going to do that. They're not interested in doing something like that because, firstly, that's not the Indian policy. Indian policy is not to necessarily attack people. However, if you're attacked, then you'll have to defend yourself, in which case then all the gloves come off. And in that kind of intense scenario, drones are going to come in a big way. Surface-to-surface missiles are going to come in a big way. And there will be a lot of attrition on both sides. It's unlike where, the US Air Force, the first Gulf War, no US civilian died. I mean, they were sitting in America and their war was being held on the side of the world. So, but the Iraqis were dying. Lots of them were dying. And similarly, in India, it will not be like that. In India, a lot of civilian casualties are going to be there. And, we'll have to cater for that because we don't want that kind of thing to happen. So we'll have to try to get a warfare which is more realistic, or try to avoid it. So basically what we are doing now, what India is doing, is to try and prevent a war by making things so, if suppose somebody does attack India, they will suffer a lot before they can think they can get any victory or something like that. That is basically the intention of India. So that's my view. Retired guy, yeah? So that might have changed.
So the West has made wars for no reasons, purely for economic gains, and India has so India is getting into that position where the sphere of Indian economic interests lie to the west coast of Africa now, and towards the South China Sea. These are the sphere of influence now. Almost like
Correct.
4,000 miles in any direction. Miles,
Yes.
I'm saying miles, people can convert 1.6 in multiply 1.6, and they'll get the kilometers there. So 4,000 miles, 4,000 miles. And
Absolutely.
I'm a student of Mahabharata. So I can always tell you that India's northern boundary in times Hastinapur time was
Correct.
Kyrgyzstan, was the northern
Correct.
boundary.
Correct.
That's where the Indian defense used to start. So there
Correct.
was no enemy from Kyrgyzstan down to Hastinapur, or from Syria down to Hastinapur, or from Indonesia down to Hastinapur. No enemies there. This was a sphere of influence India always had. So, and a lot of things can be taken from Mahabharata because my study is mostly on geographical side, and how the armies at that time functioned. Very, very intense. Mahabharata says how they intensely they were. So because you are you were part of the defenders of India. So for your job is to make sure, or I means I'm not saying your job, but I'm saying my what my purpose is, like your responsibility was to ensure that no enemy can come in. So if a war is thrust, and the West is sitting right south, Diego Garcia, and right there they're sitting there, and the French atoll is right south towards the Antarctica. So there are two Western stations, physical stations in the Indian Ocean, and Madagascar also to some extent because French Rafales are operating over there. In an unlikely scenario, this is the last question, and then we'll have more discussion in other shows. Just give me a
Good.
very short answer. How is
Yeah.
Indian Air Force, Indian forces prepared for a war which is thrust upon us, because people are going to attack with economic interest, for economic interest, because India is going to be the third biggest economy, and all wars are done for economic reasons. No other reason is there. Mainly, all colonization was economic. So, how will India defend? According to you, is India in a position to be a really called a superpower? Because India is economic superpower, military has to follow, or military has to lead.
The fact is, the recent demonstration by the Su-30s flying way into the sea, 14 hours they flew. That was basically to tell everybody, the world really, that India can reach up to, way into the South China Sea if necessary. It can go all the way up to the coast of Africa and come back in the operator machine and come back without any problem. So, but this will not be like a regular thing. But if necessary, it can be done. We have two aircraft carriers now; those are quite capable. We are getting the latest aircraft for them. So it's not that I don't think anybody is unnecessarily going to start a war among from the Western nations because they're not really interested in trying to attack India. India is not a not a country which all the friendliness you've seen between the West and India. I don't think that's going to happen. But still, we can never rule out anything, like you said. And yes, if necessary, we will be able to definitely give a fitting response. And apart from that, we do have long-range missiles, the Agni 3, Agni 4. Yeah, very, very long-range missiles. So, and they're nuclear capable. So nobody's going to mess with India for the heck of it. If anybody does that, they're going to suffer the consequences. And superpower or not, I don't know. That's a weird way of saying, I think, because superpower means what, I'm so
It's a media
master of,
creation, media creation. Oh, that's it. It's a Hollywood movie inspired in a word, actually.
yeah, something like that, just to create an impression in people's minds, innocent people's minds.
Doesn't
So,
exist.
yeah. So that's what we're quite capable of handling all the things which will be thrown at us. Yes, we need the support of the public. We need our Indian majority, at least, of the Indians to support our defense forces when they're doing their job because they're going to be risking their lives. They're fighting far away from their families, and that is very important. That is the core of what will keep us fighting fit. That's my
And
view.
I have never met an Indian in the US, Indian American, who doesn't love India. I've never met anyone. So there is a sense of native pride in India, Indians actually. Doesn't matter which religion they belong to, where they belong to, but political is differences apart. But India is India. Unlike any other country. They may criticize on the politics, but I have not met a single Indian American who doesn't love India. I've never met. And a lot of Indians I've met. So it's
Yeah.
people know that also. But thank you so much, Wing Commander, for coming on the show
My
and
pleasure.
sharing your valuable insights. It will be very motivating for youth to hear that. And thank you to all the members of Sattology and Patreon members who are there. And because of you, the Sattology show runs, and we are fiercely independent, debunking mythology. Do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback. And Jai Hind to Wing Commander Uday.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Namaste. Thank you.